Welcome back to Chill Sports History, where we take a calm and relaxing look at some of the most memorable stories from the world of sports. Whether you are listening closely, keeping this episode on in the background, or settling in at the end of the day, I hope you can get comfortable and enjoy the story. Today, we are going back to the 2007 Major League Baseball season, when the Colorado Rockies suddenly became almost impossible to beat at exactly the moment their season appeared ready to end. For most of the year, Colorado looked like a promising but inconsistent young team. The Rockies had talented hitters, excellent defense, and several players beginning to establish themselves, but they spent much of the season chasing better-known contenders in a crowded National League playoff race. Then, in the middle of September, everything changed. Colorado began winning night after night, survived one of the most dramatic tiebreaker games in baseball history, and swept its first two playoff opponents. A franchise that had never won a postseason series raced all the way to its first World Series while winning 21 of 22 games. This is the story of how the Colorado Rockies caught fire all the way to the World Series. The Colorado Rockies entered Major League Baseball in 1993. From the beginning, the franchise was closely associated with offense. The thin air and high altitude of Denver helped balls travel farther, and Coors Field quickly became known as one of the best places in baseball to hit. Rockies games were frequently filled with home runs, extra base hits, and unusually high scores. Colorado could build powerful lineups, but finding pitchers who could consistently succeed at altitude was much more difficult. Breaking balls did not move in quite the same way, fly balls carried farther, and even talented pitchers sometimes struggled to adjust. The Rockies reached the playoffs as a wild-card team in 1995, only their third season, but they lost their opening series to the Atlanta Braves. Over the decade that followed, Colorado became better known for individual offensive stars than for team success. Larry Walker won the National League Most Valuable Player Award in 1997, and players such as Dante Bichette, Andres Galarraga, and Vinny Castilla produced enormous numbers. Yet the Rockies could not build a complete roster capable of returning to the postseason. By the middle of the 2000s, Colorado began taking a more patient approach. Instead of trying to solve every problem through expensive free agent signings, the organization focused on drafting and developing its own players. General Manager Dan O'Dowd and manager Clint Hurdle gradually assembled a young core that they hoped could grow together. The results were not immediate. Hurdle had managed the Rockies since 2002, and Colorado had not produced a winning season during that time. By 2007, both he and the organization needed evidence that the plan was working. The veteran at the center of the team was Todd Helton. Colorado had selected Helton in the first round of the 1995 draft, and he reached the major leagues 2 years later. He became one of the best hitters in franchise history, combining power, patience, and consistency. Helton had spent his entire career in Colorado and had remained loyal through years when the Rockies rarely came close to the playoffs. By 2007, he was no longer producing the enormous home run totals of his peak, but he was still an excellent hitter and the most recognizable player on the roster. For many of the younger Rockies, he represented the connection between the franchise's past and what it hoped to become. The best player on the 2007 team was left fielder Matt Holliday. Holliday had developed gradually after being selected in the 7th round of the draft. He was not considered a future superstar when he entered professional baseball, but his strength and ability to hit for average became impossible to ignore. In 2007, he produced the finest season of his career. Holliday led the National League with a .340 batting average, recorded 36 home runs, drove in 137 runs, and finished second in the voting for League Most Valuable Player. He gave Colorado a dangerous presence in the middle of the lineup and became the offensive force behind everything that followed. The most exciting new player was rookie shortstop Troy Tulowitzki. Colorado had selected Tulowitzki near the top of the 2005 draft, and he arrived in the major leagues with high expectations. He immediately showed why. Tulowitzki combined power with outstanding defense at one of baseball's most demanding positions. He hit 24 home runs, drove in 99, and played with a confidence that made him appear far more experienced than he was. In April, he even completed an unassisted triple play, catching a line drive, stepping on second base, and tagging a runner before anyone else touched the ball. Tulowitzki finished second in the National League Rookie of the Year voting and quickly became one of the central figures in the franchise. The rest of the lineup gave Colorado unusual depth. Third baseman Garrett Atkins was a steady run producer. Right fielder Brad Hopp provided left-handed power. Center fielder Willie Taveras brought speed, while second baseman Kazuo Matsui became an important table setter near the top of the order. Catcher Yorvit Torrealba offered defense and occasional power. The Rockies did not rely entirely on one star. They could receive production from nearly every part of the lineup. The pitching staff still did not receive the same attention as the hitters, but it was far more capable than many people assumed. Canadian left-hander Jeff Francis emerged as the leading starter, winning 17 games and providing stability at the top of the rotation. Aaron Cook used a heavy sinking fastball to keep the ball on the ground, an especially valuable skill at Coors Field. Josh Fogg became known for surviving difficult matchups, and a young Ubaldo Jimenez joined the rotation late in the season. In the bullpen, Manny Corpas eventually replaced Brian Fuentes as closer and became one of Colorado's most dependable pitchers during the stretch run. Defense was one of the team's greatest strengths. The Rockies set what was then a major league record for fielding percentage. Tulowitzki was exceptional at shortstop. Helton remained one of the league's finest defensive first basemen, and the outfield covered considerable ground. Colorado's reputation was still shaped by the high-scoring games of its early history, but the 2007 team could win in ways that previous Rockies clubs often could not. It could prevent runs, turn difficult plays into outs, and protect narrow leads. For much of the season, however, Colorado did not look like a future World Series team. The Rockies began slowly, losing more often than they won during April, and spending much of the early season below 500. They improved as the summer continued and showed stretches of impressive baseball, but they could not separate themselves from the crowded National League West. The Arizona Diamondbacks, San Diego Padres, Los Angeles Dodgers, and Rockies all remained within reach of postseason contention. Colorado's young roster could be brilliant for a week and then ordinary for the next. Holliday continued hitting, Tulowitzki continued developing, and the defense remained strong, but the Rockies entered September with little room for error. They were not leading their division, and several teams stood between them and the wild card. A respectable season appeared possible. A playoff appearance did not. On September 16th, Colorado lost to the Florida Marlins. The defeat left the Rockies with 76 wins and 72 losses. They sat 4.5 games behind San Diego in the wildcard race, and other teams were also ahead of them. Only 14 scheduled games remained. At that point, the Rockies did not control their own future. They needed to win almost every night while hoping the teams in front of them began losing. That was when the season changed. Colorado began its final home series against the Los Angeles Dodgers and won the opening game. The Rockies won again the following day, then completed the sweep. They traveled to San Diego and defeated the Padres 3 straight times, directly gaining ground on the team they were chasing. They returned to Coors Field and swept the Dodgers again. The winning streak reached 8 games, then 9, then 10. The Rockies were not winning in only one way. Some nights Holliday or Tulowitzki provided the decisive hit. On others, the pitching staff protected a small lead. The defense remained nearly flawless, and the bullpen repeatedly finished close games. Players who had spent most of the season trying to remain relevant suddenly began expecting to win. The streak reached 11 games before Arizona finally defeated Colorado on September 28th. With only 2 scheduled games remaining, the loss could have ended the Rockies' hopes. Instead, Colorado won the next day, and again on the final day of the regular season. The Rockies completed their schedule by winning 13 of 14 games. Even that was not enough to place them directly in the playoffs. Colorado and San Diego finished with identical records of 89 wins and 73 losses. Because Major League Baseball had not yet expanded the postseason to include additional wildcard teams, one game would decide everything. The Rockies and Padres would meet at Coors Field on October 1st in a tiebreaker that counted as the 163rd game of the regular season. The winner would advance to face the Philadelphia Phillies. The loser's season would be over. The matchup immediately carried enormous tension. San Diego had reached the playoffs in each of the previous 2 seasons and possessed one of the strongest pitching staffs in baseball. The Padres also had Trevor Hoffman, the all-time leader in saves at the time, and one of the greatest closers the game had ever seen. Colorado had momentum and home field advantage, but it was also a young team playing the most important game in franchise history. The Rockies started Josh Fogg, while San Diego used former Cy Young Award winner Jake Peavy. Neither pitcher was able to settle into the game. The Padres scored twice in the top of the first inning, but Colorado answered with 3 runs in the bottom half. The Rockies added another in the second, taking a 4-2 lead, but San Diego responded. The score moved back and forth. Adrian Gonzalez hit a grand slam for the Padres, turning the game in San Diego's favor. Colorado answered again, helped by home runs from Tulowitzki and Holliday. Each time one team appeared ready to take control, the other produced another important swing. By the end of 9 innings, the score was tied at 6. The game moved into extra innings. Both teams had opportunities, but neither could score in the 10th, 11th, or 12th. The tension continued building. Every pitch could send one team into the playoffs and end the other's season. In the top of the 13th inning, San Diego finally broke through. Scott Hairston hit a 2-run home run off Jorge Julio, giving the Padres an 8-6 lead. After more than 4 hours of baseball, Colorado's remarkable late-season run appeared to be over. The Padres were 3 outs away from the playoffs, and Trevor Hoffman entered to finish the game. Hoffman had recorded more than 500 career saves. His entrance music and changeup had become familiar parts of San Diego baseball, and he had built his career by protecting exactly this kind of late lead. Colorado needed 2 runs simply to remain alive. Kazuo Matsui opened the bottom of the 13th with a double. Tulowitzki followed with another double, driving Matsui home and cutting the lead to 8-7. Suddenly, the crowd at Coors Field came alive again. The tie-in run was in scoring position, nobody was out, and Holliday was coming to the plate. Holliday drove a ball deep into right field. It struck the wall and bounced away from the outfielder. Tulowitzki scored easily, tying the game, while Holliday raced into third base with a triple. In only 3 batters, Colorado had erased the 2-run deficit against one of the greatest closers in history. The winning run now stood 90 feet from home. The Padres intentionally walked Helton and Jamie Carroll came to the plate. Carroll lifted a fly ball into right field. The catch was made, and Holliday tagged at third. He sprinted toward home as the throw arrived. Holliday slid head first and collided with catcher Michael Barrett. He ended up face down in the dirt, momentarily dazed. Home plate umpire Tim McClellan spread his arms and called him safe. The game was over. Colorado had won 9-8. The Rockies poured from the dugout and surrounded Holliday near home plate. The crowd erupted, although Holliday himself appeared unsure what had happened. His teammates had to help him to his feet while the celebration continued around him. Replays created an immediate debate. It was not clear whether Holliday had actually touched home plate with his hand before Barrett applied the tag. Some angles suggested he may have missed it. Others were inconclusive. Baseball did not yet use replay review for that type of call, so the umpire's decision stood. For San Diego, it became a painful controversy. For Colorado, it became the defining image of the season. Holliday diving toward the plate, his face in the dirt, while an entire franchise rushed toward him. The Rockies had won 14 of their final 15 games. After spending most of September outside the playoff picture, they were going to the postseason. There was almost no time to celebrate. 2 days later, Colorado opened the National League Division Series in Philadelphia. The Phillies had completed their own dramatic late-season comeback, overtaking the New York Mets to win the National League East. Their lineup was one of the most dangerous in baseball. Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley, Ryan Howard, and Pat Burrell gave Philadelphia power throughout the order. Rollins would win the National League Most Valuable Player award, narrowly finishing ahead of Holliday. Colorado sent Jeff Francis to the mound in Game 1. Francis delivered one of the most important starts of his career, holding Philadelphia's offense under control while the Rockies scored early. Tulowitzki hit a home run, and Colorado won 4-2. The late-season momentum had survived the emotional tiebreaker. Game 2 was more chaotic. The Rockies built an early lead, the Phillies fought back, and Colorado's bullpen had to protect a narrow advantage late. The Rockies won 6-5, taking both games in Philadelphia and returning to Denver, one victory away from the first postseason series win in franchise history. Game 3 became a pitching duel. Colorado and Philadelphia remained tied at 1 into the 8th inning. The Rockies then scored 3 times, helped by a pinch hit double from Jeff Baker and another important contribution from Matsui. Colorado won 4-1 and completed the sweep. The Rockies had entered the series with no postseason series victories in franchise history. 3 games later, they were heading to the National League Championship Series without a loss. Their opponent was the Arizona Diamondbacks, a familiar team from the National League West. Arizona had won 90 games and finished 1 game ahead of Colorado in the division standings. The Diamondbacks were not a dominant offensive team, but they had excellent pitching and had consistently found ways to win close games. Brandon Webb, the reigning National League Cy Young Award winner, led the rotation. Game 1 was played in Arizona. Francis again started for Colorado, and the Rockies took an early lead. The game also included controversy when Arizona fans threw objects onto the field after a disputed interference call. Once play resumed, Colorado protected its advantage and won 5-1. Game 2 was much closer. The teams remained tied into extra innings. In the top of the 11th, the Rockies loaded the bases. Willie Taveras then drew a walk, forcing home the go-ahead run. Corpus finished the game and Colorado won 3-2. The series moved to Coors Field with the Rockies leading 2-0. In Game 3, Colorado's pitching again controlled Arizona. Josh Fogg worked effectively, the bullpen completed the shutout, and the Rockies won 4-1. Colorado was now 1 victory from the World Series. Game 4 began with an atmosphere unlike anything the franchise had experienced. Fans throughout Denver had embraced the term Rocktober, a nickname that captured how suddenly the Rockies had taken over the baseball world. The team had gone from nearly eliminated to 1 win from the National League pennant in less than a month. Colorado built an early lead, and Holliday delivered the decisive swing. In the bottom of the 4th inning, he hit a 3-run home run into the left field stands, giving the Rockies a 6-1 advantage. Arizona fought back, but the Colorado bullpen held on. With 2 outs in the 9th, Eric Burns hit a ground ball towards shortstop. Tulowitzki fielded it and threw to Helton at first base. Helton caught the ball and raised both arms. For the younger Rockies, success had arrived almost immediately. Tulowitzki was a rookie, and several other players were only beginning their careers. Helton had waited a decade. He had remained with the franchise through losing seasons, failed rebuilding efforts, and constant questions about whether Colorado could ever build a winner. Now he stood at first base as the Rockies became National League champions. His teammates surrounded him, and the celebration spread across the field. Colorado had swept the Diamondbacks 4-0. Holliday was named the most valuable player of the series after batting .447 with 2 home runs. The Rockies had opened the postseason with 7 consecutive victories. Counting the end of the regular season and the tiebreaker against San Diego, Colorado had won 21 of 22 games. In barely 1 month, the Rockies had moved from 4th place in their division to the World Series. At that point, however, their momentum was forced to stop. Colorado completed its sweep on October 15th. In the American League, the Boston Red Sox and Cleveland Indians were still playing their championship series. Cleveland took a 3-1 lead, but Boston recovered and forced the series to 7 games. The Red Sox eventually won, setting up the World Series, but the delay meant Colorado went 8 days without playing. The long break became one of the lasting questions about the Rockies' run. Baseball players are accustomed to playing nearly every day, especially during a stretch in which everything seems to be working. Colorado had spent weeks moving from one emotional game to the next. Then, at the hottest point in franchise history, the Rockies had to wait. It would be too simple to say the layoff alone ended their momentum. The Boston Red Sox were an excellent team and had finished with the best record in the American League. They had won the World Series 3 years earlier and entered the championship round with a roster filled with experience. David Ortiz and Manny Ramirez anchored the middle of the lineup. Mike Lowell, Dustin Pedroia, Kevin Youkilis, and Jason Varitek added depth. Josh Beckett had become one of baseball's best postseason pitchers, while Curt Schilling brought years of experience in major games. Boston was not hoping its run would continue. It expected to win. Game 1 at Fenway Park changed the tone almost immediately. Pedroia led off the bottom of the first inning with a home run, and Boston scored 3 times before Colorado recorded its first out. Beckett overpowered the Rockies' hitters, striking out 9 while allowing only 1 run. The Red Sox continued adding to the lead and won 13-1. It was the first loss Colorado had experienced since September 28th. After winning 21 of 22, the Rockies had been overwhelmed on baseball's biggest stage. They responded with a much better performance in Game 2. Colorado scored first, and Ubaldo Jimenez kept the game close. Schilling and the Boston bullpen limited the Rockies, however, and the Red Sox came back to win 2-1. The series shifted to Denver, where Colorado hoped returning to Coors Field would help revive the offense. Boston built a 6-0 lead in Game 3, but the Rockies finally produced a rally. Holliday hit a 3-run home run, and Colorado pulled within 1. For the first time in the series, the momentum briefly appeared to be changing. Boston immediately answered with more runs and won 10-5. The Rockies now faced elimination in Game 4. Aaron Cook returned from an injury and gave Colorado a respectable start, but Boston again moved ahead. Brad Hopp and Garrett Atkins hit late home runs, bringing the Rockies closer, but the Red Sox held on for a 4-3 victory. Boston celebrated its second championship in 4 seasons on the field at Coors Field. Colorado's remarkable run ended with 4 consecutive losses. The Rockies had swept their way through the National League and then been swept in the World Series. The reversal was sudden and painful. For weeks, Colorado had seemed incapable of losing. Then, in the final series, very little went right. The Red Sox outscored the Rockies 29-10. Holliday continued to hit, but much of the lineup struggled. Boston's pitching controlled Colorado, and every Rockies rally seemed to end before it could fully develop. Yet the World Series result did not erase what had come before it. The Rockies had not reached the championship simply because of luck. Holliday had produced an MVP-caliber season. Tulowitzki had immediately become one of baseball's finest young shortstops. Helton remained a franchise cornerstone. Francis gave the team a dependable leading starter, and the defense was among the best in the major leagues. The late-season streak was extraordinary, but Colorado had enough talent to take advantage once everything came together. The Rockies had also created the greatest stretch in franchise history. They survived a wild-card race that appeared nearly impossible. They won 13 of their final 14 scheduled games. They came back against Trevor Hoffman in the 13th inning of Game 163. They swept the Phillies and Diamondbacks without losing a postseason game. For an entire month, every close contest seemed to produce another Colorado hero. The run also gave Todd Helton the defining team achievement of his career. He never won a World Series, but after years of carrying the franchise through difficult seasons, he finally experienced a pennant celebration at Coors Field. The image of Helton raising his arms after recording the final out of the National League Championship Series became nearly as important to Rockies history as Holliday's slide against San Diego. Colorado returned much of the roster the following season, but could not recreate the same success. Injuries and inconsistency pulled the team back below 500. The Rockies reached the playoffs again in 2009, but they did not return to the World Series. Players from the 2007 team gradually moved on. Holliday was traded after the following season, while Tulowitzki and Jimenez later became established stars. Helton remained in Colorado until the end of his career. The 2007 run remained unique because of how quickly it happened. The Rockies did not spend the entire year dominating the National League. They did not lead their division from beginning to end. They entered the final weeks with almost no margin for error, then played nearly perfect baseball. That is what made Rocktober feel so unusual. Momentum in baseball can disappear without warning. Even the best teams lose regularly during a 162-game season. Colorado suddenly stopped doing so. Night after night, the Rockies found another way to survive. A young roster became more confident with every victory, and a city that had waited 12 years for another playoff appearance began expecting something remarkable. The ending was disappointing, but it was also part of what made the story memorable. Colorado's run rose so quickly that the World Series defeat felt like a sudden return to reality. The Rockies discovered that even the hottest team in baseball could be stopped by a deeper and more experienced opponent. But 4 difficult games could not erase the 21 victories that had brought them there. The 2007 Rockies did not become champions. They became something different, a team remembered for making an almost impossible month feel inevitable. Once the streak began, every victory seemed to lead naturally to another. San Diego's 2-run lead in the 13th inning did not end the season. Philadelphia's powerful lineup did not slow the Rockies. Arizona's pitching could not stop them. For 21 games out of 22, Colorado always seemed to find the next hit, the next defensive play, or the next pitcher capable of protecting a lead. Thank you for spending this time with me on Chill Sports History. I hope you enjoyed looking back at the Colorado Rockies and one of the most sudden and unforgettable pennant runs in baseball history. For most of the 2007 season, the Rockies were simply a talented young team trying to remain close enough to matter. Then September arrived, the losses nearly disappeared, and Denver became the center of the baseball world. The final chapter did not bring a championship, but the journey gave the franchise its greatest season and created memories that still define Rockies baseball. Holliday's desperate slide, Helton's raised arms, Tulowitzki's emergence, and the sound of Coors Field during Rocktober all became part of the same remarkable month. Until next time, take care, and thanks for listening. We love sharing these fun stories with you every week. If you'd like to come back for another story, we'd be very happy to have you here, and we can't wait to share more with you.